On a side street in a town you've already forgotten the name of, there's a fabric store, bolts of cotton stacked in the window, a bell on the door, the clean smell of new cloth. And behind it, past the thread wall and the rack of patterned books, there's a back room most customers never see. A workbench under a single hanging light. A pegboard hung with the smallest screwdrivers you've ever seen, the kind made for watches. Little drawers, every one labeled in pencil, full of bobbins and bobbin cases and feed dogs and tension springs. A coffee can bristling with needles. And machines everywhere, heavy black ones with gold scroll work, almond-colored ones from the 70s, glossy plastic ones from last year, every one of them opened up and waiting. The air smells like sewing machine oil, warm metal, and lint. This is where Walter works. He's been repairing sewing machines for more than 50 years, long enough that he learned the trade from his mother, who ran this shop before him, back when Singer still sent a man around to service machines in people's homes. Walter can date a Singer from its serial number without looking it up. He can tell you what's wrong with a machine before he plugs it in, just by turning the handwheel a quarter turn and feeling where it catches. On a shelf above his bench sits a small black machine he will never sell, a 1948 Singer Featherweight, his mother's. It still sews a perfect stitch. He keeps it up there the way some men keep a photograph. Walter understands a kind of machine most people stop thinking about the moment it works again. The machine that jams 2 stitches into a quilt that took a year to piece. The one that snaps every needle you put in it. The one that loops thread into a bird's nest underneath, no matter what you do. The one that sat in a closet for 30 years and won't turn at all, frozen solid, the owner says, like it died in there. None of it dramatic. All of it the difference between a project finished and a project given up on. There's a rhythm to the work if you watch it long enough. In late summer, the machines come in ahead of costume season, because somebody promised a kid a homemade Halloween costume and the machine hasn't run since last October. In the winter, the holiday sewers and the quilters, working through the cold months. In spring, the alterations, prom dresses, wedding dresses, the season of things that have to fit exactly right by a certain date and cannot be late. Walter knows that calendar the way a farmer knows his. But the biggest rush of his life came out of nowhere in the spring of 2020. When the world shut down and masks were suddenly impossible to buy, people did something they hadn't done in a generation. They went up to the attic and brought down grandmother's machine. For a few months, it seemed like every closet in the country gave up its forgotten sewing machine, and they all came to men like Walter, dusty, frozen, threaded wrong, bobbins still loaded with someone's last project from 1985. He worked 12-hour days that spring. He had never felt so necessary or so tired. Most of what comes through the door isn't broken the way people think it is. A machine that won't sew usually sews fine. It's threaded wrong, or the tension is off, or there's a wad of lint packed under the needle plate as thick as a felt pad, years of it, from someone who never once opened the bobbin case to clean it out. And a machine that's frozen usually isn't broken at all. It's just that the oil inside, the oil that should have kept everything sliding for decades, has dried into varnish and glued the whole mechanism still. Walter has a patience for the frozen ones. He'll put a single drop of oil at every joint, set the machine somewhere warm, and leave it overnight, sometimes longer. Then he works the hand wheel by hand, back and forth, a little farther each time, until the old grease finally lets go and the machine remembers how to move. A woman sets a machine on the counter and says it just stopped working. When did it last sew? Oh, years. Was it covered up? I think so. You ever have it oiled? A pause. And Walter already knows what he'll find when he takes the cover off. There's a gentleness in those conversations that's particular to this trade. Because the woman at the counter is rarely only asking about a machine. She's asking about her mother's machine. Or her grandmother's. The one she learned to sew on as a girl, sitting on a phone book to reach the pedal. The Singer that made her wedding dress, or the school clothes, or the curtains in 3 different houses across 30 years. That's the thing about sewing machines that a price tag never captures. A good one outlived the person who bought it. The old machines were built for exactly that. A 1950s Singer 201 is cast iron and steel, geared like a clock, made in an age when a sewing machine was a serious purchase and a centerpiece of the house. A Pfaff, a Bernina, a Necchi from that era will still drive a needle through 8 layers of denim today, long after the company stopped making parts for it. These machines were meant to be handed down, and they were, mother to daughter, again and again, until one of them finally stopped and somebody carried it in and asked the only question that mattered. Not, is it worth fixing? But, can you save it? There's a difference between those two questions, and Walter hears it every single day. By the numbers, half of what he repairs makes no sense. You can buy a brand new sewing machine for $80 now. Plastic gears, a plastic body, a motor that's strong enough right up until the day it isn't. It'll handle a school project and a Halloween costume. And then, somewhere around its third or fourth year, something inside will strip or crack, and there will be no fixing it, because it was never built to be fixed. Set that next to a 60-year-old singer that needs $40 of work and will then sew for another 60 years, and the math isn't really a contest. But people don't always buy the new one. They carry in the old one, because you can't inherit a feeling from a plastic machine. That sentiment is part of what's kept Walter's trade alive a little longer than some others. A lawn mower is a tool. A sewing machine, for a lot of people, is a relative. But sentiment alone doesn't pay the rent. Because the cheap machines still flood in, and they still can't be fixed, and the customer still has to be told so, gently. And the parts for the good old machines get harder to find every year. A particular bobbin case, a motor belt in an odd size, a tension assembly for a model discontinued before Walter was born. For that, he keeps a wall of donor machines, machines too far gone to save, kept around as organ donors for the ones that can be. And like every repair trade, this one is running out of the people who know how to do it. The knowledge doesn't come from a manual. It comes from sound and feel, from turning 10,000 hand wheels until you can tell a timing problem from a tension problem with your eyes closed. Timing is the heart of it. The hook has to come around to catch the thread at the exact instant the needle reaches the bottom and begins to rise, a window measured in fractions of a millimeter. Get it wrong and the machine skips, or jams, or simply won't make a stitch at all. You can read about timing all day. You cannot learn to feel it from reading. Walter learned it over years, standing beside his mother with his hands. But the bench beside him is empty now. The young people who sew mostly don't want to fix. The young people who fix mostly don't sew. And the shops are closing one at a time, each one carrying a little library of feel and sound and serial numbers out the door for good. Walter is in his 70s. His hands are as steady on the small screws as they ever were. But the catalogs he learned from went out of print long ago, and the company men who once trained repairmen retired before the internet had a name. When a shop like his closes, something quiet goes with it. Not only a service, a second chance for objects that hold more than their function. The next time a machine freezes in a closet, and it will, because closets are full of them, there may be no one nearby who knows that frozen almost always means neglected, not dead. No one to put a drop of oil at every joint and simply wait. So the machine goes to the curb. The stitches it would have sewn never get sewn, and a small thread running from one generation to the next is quietly cut. But men and women like Walter are still out there. Some work in back rooms behind fabric stores. Some sit at the back of a sew and vac, fixing vacuum cleaners up front and machines in the back. Some set up at quilt shows with a folding table and a tray of tools, working through a line of people holding their machines like sick pets. Some drive out to farmhouses and church basements where the quilting circles still meet. And a few younger ones found their way in through the vintage world, the collectors of black and gold singers who realized that somebody has to keep them running. They survive because people still sew, people still mend, people still inherit a machine and want it to work. The need is quieter than it used to be. It never went away. A woman carries in a machine that hasn't run since her mother died. It's frozen, the hand won't move at all. She doesn't really expect a miracle. She just couldn't bring herself to throw it away. Walter takes the cover off. He clears out a closet's worth of packed lint and old thread. He oils every joint and lets the machine sit a full day. He works the wheel back and forth until the varnish lets go and it turns again, rough at first, then smooth. He replaces a dry-rotted belt, resets the timing, balances the tension, threads it up, and slides a scrap of plain muslin under the foot. Then he presses the pedal. The machine comes to life with that fast, even chatter that hasn't changed in 100 years, and a line of small, perfect stitches runs out across the cloth. Walter pulls the scrap free, turns it over, and studies the underside, checking that the top and bottom threads lock evenly in the middle, that the tension is true, that the fix will hold. He doesn't say much. He sets the scrap aside and writes up the ticket. Another machine saved. Not for the money. There was never much money in it. For the woman who'll take it home and sew on her mother's machine again. For another quilt, another costume, another hem taken up the night before it's needed. For one more generation. Because keeping old machines alive was never really about the machines. It was about the people who refused to let the useful, the well-made, and the loved get thrown out just because something newer was on sale that week. Walter will never be famous. His shop is a back room behind a fabric store on a side street, and his hands will always smell faintly of machine oil. But as long as people sew and machines freeze in closets, and somebody carries one in and asks not is it worth it, but can you save it, there will be a back room somewhere with the light on, a bench full of tiny screwdrivers, and a man who turns the hand while a quarter turn, feels where it catches, and knows exactly where to begin. His proof was never a speech. It's a line of perfect stitches on a scrap of cloth. If stories like this stay with you, subscribe to the channel, and I'll save another one next time.